afternoon and welcome to Cooking with Grace. I am your host, Dyann Duncan, and with me today is Siobahn Jackson. We are very glad you're here today. We have a very interesting topic to talk about with Siobahn today. But first, we are going to make mock or imitation Wendy's Frosties, which I love Frosties.
Yes.
And I will be saving mine. I might take a bite, but I'll probably be saving mine because I don't know if you do this, but I dip my fries.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have to have the fries. With the
That's
frosting.
important.
It is.
Yeah.
So anyway, my husband thinks it's disgusting because he's like, you're dipping it in ice cream. And I'm like, I don't think it's technically ice cream.
It's perfect, sweet and savory.
Oh, yeah, with the salt?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So, all right, what you're going to need is get the kids. This is relatively easy, but it could be messy. I don't know, never made this before. That's the fun of all these recipes. I've never experimented before. But this is a half gallon of chocolate milk. You need a can of sweetened condensed milk. And then a tub of Cool Whip, which, as you can see, I buy generic. So anyway, it's cheaper,
Yeah.
but I think it's going to taste the same. So anyway, we'll give it a go. Siobahn, if you want to pour that in, I'll work on scooping this out because I think this is going to take a minute. You stand back like it's going to explode.
We're social distancing.
We are. We're being appropriate.
You want the whole thing in there?
Yeah, it said the whole thing. And then after we're all done mixing it up, we are going to put it in these pitchers. It's not supposed to freeze like solid like ice cream, but it does help it set up because the only thing that's really cold right now is the Cool Whip and the chocolate milk. Go ahead and if you can get that dumped in there. And then I'll give you this to finish it up.
You want to scrape it?
Yeah. Ew. I'm sorry, that does not look appetizing.
You know what is good is if you get pecans and dip it in that sweetened condensed milk.
No way.
Oh, it's yummy.
I've never tried that. You know what? I'm going to grab that from you because I am not that talented. And I will let you start stirring however you want to stir. How did you wanted to use the whisk?
Yes.
I'm going to scrape that too then. So get all that luscious Cool Whipness. I know.
Sorry.
It's not getting each other's space here. And we'll throw this away while you're mixing that up and hopefully getting it more appetizing looking.
Yeah, it looks a little, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll solidify better, but right now it's just kind of interesting looking. And like I said, I mean, I'm sure Wendy's has like a big churning machine, like a professional, thing, but, I think it's looking pretty good. And we will be tasting it. That's, the one thing you have to do.
We'll taste it for sure.
You have to be taste testers. So.
You could make this quicker by putting it in a hand mixer.
That's true.
If you wanted to.
And we have one. I found out after I did one of these, and I said, I don't know where we have one or not. Linda Schaefer sent me a Facebook message. And she goes, yeah, it's back there by the, and I was like, oh, nice to know.
So how far does this have to be whisked?
I think that looks good enough for me. I mean, it just says mixed together. That's mixed to me.
So you don't have to have it creamy and with peaks.
I know.
Because have you seen the recipe for whipped coffee?
Yes. No, thank you. I delete all
that's
those
where
posts.
you use the hand mixer for
Yes. No.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty. It needs just be combined.
Yes,
Basically.
I think so. So do you think you have the skill to pour it into these?
We'll see. We will see.
Let's
Okay.
say, Julia Childs, we are not, right?
Well, we'll see.
Oh, are you?
No. I like to cook, but I would not go to that level.
Oh,
see?
that's okay. That's okay. Hey, it's real life, We've said
This
that
is
all
what will
along.
happen at home if you do it too fast.
That's okay.
You want to try
it
to
cleans
split
up.
it so it
Yeah, so it'll freeze up faster. That's
faster.
genius. Yeah.
And then we'll show you how to clean up messes.
Yeah. As we talk. But at that point, if you have kids in the room, you might want to ask them to step away. We're going to be talking about some sensitive stuff, like I said, some domestic violence, especially right now. I don't know if people are aware of it, but domestic violence sometimes, all the time, I guess. I'm not an expert, that's why Siobhahn's here, goes up when people are confined to certain spaces in close areas. That was the ice machine. So anyway, hope y'all heard me. But I'm going to take
those
these
away.
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, who you are, your family, and how did you come to know Christ?
So I am Siobahn Jackson, and I am married to Scott Jackson, and my son is Garrett Jackson. He's a senior this year. I have been going to Grace for 28 years, believe it or not. I was saved in Sierra Vista, Arizona at a Calvary Chapel there. Went to Bible college at Calvary Chapel in Twin Peaks, California. And then came back home and did a couple of odd jobs. But the one I landed on was law enforcement. And I did that for 7.5 years, 2.5, let me do the math, 2.5 at the sheriff's department, 4.5 with the police department, and I was particularly drawn to domestic violence and sexual violence and working with those cases and with those victims. Then we went on the mission field for a while, came back and started working at the YWCA as a sexual assault victim advocate, and then I was a court advocate at the courthouse working with people, domestic violence situations, ex partes, court processes, and now I work for the prosecuting attorney's office as their victim advocate, one of their victim advocates, and I primarily work with domestic violence victims. So that's me in a nutshell. Do you know what I'm like? I think that's the quick version. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you work with domestic violence. I know when I hear domestic violence, I think women
Yes.
being abused. That might not be correct. Is it broader than that? What is domestic violence that you work with?
We work with victims, both male and female. So, according to domestic violence law in your house in Missouri, anybody who lives in your house that's related to you by blood, so it can be your siblings, it can be a roommate, but they're not by blood, but they live in your home. It can be somebody you dated 20 years ago who comes back in your life and is harassing you, hurting you, doing something. That would be under the domestic violence law. Of course, your spouse, but it's also your kids. They can be, I see a lot of cases anymore between parents and children. And children, I mean adult children, because I don't work a lot with the juvenile cases. So that's really hard for me. I hate to see those cases because it's parents who are trying to help out kids, and the kids are not emotionally stable, or they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, or something's going on in their life, and mom and dad are trying to help them out, and the kids get abusive. And so the parents are trying to do everything they can, but I have a lot of talks with families about this, about what's the best course to go, because you don't want to give up on your kids. It's not giving up on your kids. It's protecting yourself so you don't get hurt. And then let's try to guide them and guide your kids to a place where they're going to get help, but they have to receive the help. You can't make them, they're not 4 anymore, where you can make them do something. They need to take the help, and so it's a hard process. I'm seeing a whole lot more of that type of domestic violence. So there's a lot of different avenues that law covers, so it's kind of misleading just to think it's between a spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend. Of course it's that, but it's
Right.
a whole lot more.
So since the quarantine, have you guys, what I've heard is that the reportings get less. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing an influx in abusive situations?
I was just talking about this with somebody this morning. What we've seen less of is reports of child abuse. So the child abuse hotline has been, statewide has been accessed a lot less. Mm-hmm. That's because the kids aren't out in the open anymore.
Where people can see them and see some abuse taking place.
Teachers,
Right.
Even at church, wherever you're seeing kids, they're not there. So we know these kiddos are now stuck at home with parents or people in the home who are abusive towards them, and it's not getting reported. So that's what we're seeing less of, and that's concerning. As far as domestic violence report, we're seeing an uptick of that because people are now together who aren't usually together as much as they are now.
24 hours a day.
Money is a stressor.
Sure.
everything's a stressor. The kids are home, everybody's home, and we don't know how to deal with this. So tempers flare, we see some of those cases, and they don't always get charged. I mean, those are usually, hey, everybody take a deep breath, let's figure this out. But I know a lot of that's going on. It isn't getting reported, so then you see some that are bad abusive relationships, and they're using the COVID-19 excuse that, I'm doing this to keep you safe. You can't go outside and visit with the neighbors because you're going to bring this in, and it gets violent. It's this very, very violent, controlling behavior. And they're using the pandemic as an excuse to justify their actions. See that a lot. So there's a whole bunch of different layers to it. So we are seeing consistent numbers of that. Our cases, domestic violence cases, have not gone down. It's pretty consistent. A way that I take the temperature for that a lot is how many ex partes were filed. So that's a temporary order of protection.
Oh, okay.
That you can get through the courts. And it's a civil document, so there a lot of times there's no criminal case attached to it. But those have been consistent since the beginning of this. So a lot of people are looking for that relief. It's a civil relief. And that's actually been higher or pretty consistent since all this started. So that's usually the better way to take the temperature, because more people are looking at ways to get this person out of the house because it can order someone out of the house. Just getting relief from the court. Somebody come in here and make this person stop is basically what they're asking. So we're seeing those numbers staying pretty high to, which is concerning because we know a lot of stress is happening. And we don't know that people know where to reach out for help. What can they do? Are the police going to respond? Is the shelter open? Are the courts open?
That's a good question. Are the shelters open right now?
Yes. So the way, and I'm in contact with them a lot because we have to work together. The census at the shelter right now, and that'd be the YWCA.
Right.
That's a domestic violence shelter. It's not for homeless. It's for domestic violence victims. Their census is pretty low because they have other programs where they're trying to get them into housing. So they're not just in the shelter, of course, because of the COVID. So, but the only way you're going to get in there is if you get the police have to bring you in. So you can't, before you could just call them and say, I'm a victim, can I come in?
Oh.
And now the police have to bring it. That's just a way for them to, just some safeguards.
Sure.
So, but they're still open. They're still going to, they still have an outreach department, which is, they work with people on the outside who aren't in shelter, and they're going to help you with resources, and they even have a program that would help you with housing. So there are a lot of people still working. You just have to get a hold of them.
Right.
And they have a person who answers the phone 24/7.
So if they call the Y directly,
yes,
they can get some kind of information or direction or something.
Yes, they're going to put you in contact, based on what you're saying, with who's going to help you the most. And it's open. They have someone 24/7. And you can go there and get information and paperwork for an ex parte after hours from the YWCA. Well, actually 24/7. But especially after hours. It's after 5 o'clock, the courthouse is closed. I can't get it there. Which, by the way, you still can get one at the courthouse during business hours. There's just a process for it. You're not going to come in the building. They're going to meet you outside of the building. And they're going to take care of business. So you can still get them. Obviously, we've seen people access them. Mm-hmm. But the YWCA does have them 24/7. And they'll have people who will help you walk through it. So, if it's confusing. My office at the prosecutor's office, I'm available if you call and you get my phone number. I check my messages. Sometimes I'm at the office, sometimes I'm at home, but I check them. I will get a hold of you. I'm sure the church can get you, in touch with me. But yes, the shelters are still open. Everybody's still working and still available. You just have to call. But what happens if you can't call because the person, I say the guy, it's not always the guy, but whoever is there, doing the abusive actions or that you're feeling fear, but you can't make the phone call, what would you do? So you can text 911 in Buchanan County.
Okay.
And you can text them and give them the message and get help to you. So then it looks pretty benign, like I'm just texting somebody. So that's an idea. I tell people that a lot. Just text 911 if you're worried about him hearing you, or her hearing you. I don't want to just make it
or your child,
yes,
or neighbor, or whatever.
Right. Text 911. It's super handy.
So okay, and this is a question. Let's say I had somebody reach out to me on Facebook Messenger saying, I'm feeling trapped, he's abusive, she's abusive, whatever. Can I call 911 and say, hey, go do a well check? Or what do I need to do as that friend or that neighbor?
That's a good question, because that happens, and that's perfectly okay. It is okay for you to call and say, hey, my friend just contacted me on Facebook, and she's feeling trapped. This is going on. This is the address, and get the police going. That's fine.
Okay.
The law enforcement may take a little bit more information from you, but really, they're going to get somebody there to help. That happens a lot, and it's encouraged. If that's what's going on, reach out to a friend and say, get the police here now, I need help.
Right.
So, get them there however you need to get them there, but they will come and they will respond and they will help.
Good. So, right now during this time, what are some of the red flags we need to be looking for? You said that the child abuse reports get down, but I know that it seems like right now kids are outside more than they've been in a long time.
Right.
What do I, as a neighbor, need to be looking for when all our kids are playing outside at a safe 6 foot distance?
The safe 6. It's the same telltale signs you might see. Usually kids who are in super abusive situations may still be a little bit more withdrawn than normal. You may not even notice that they're allowed outside. So the other kids might be playing in their yard, but you haven't seen that neighbor send their kids out, and they have them, they have kids, or if you might hear a lot of yelling and screaming coming from the house.
Good, yeah.
But it's just really, now, you hate to be the one like spying, you feel like you're spying on your neighbors, but this is really just stuff that's, everybody else is sending their kids outside for recess.
Yeah, recess.
Yeah.
Break time.
All day. But that house doesn't seem like they are sending any of the kids out, or if they are they wearing weather appropriate clothes?
So if they're wearing long sleeves and it's sunny and hot out.
Right. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it's just something to keep an eye on, just kind of like notice those things, like if something doesn't add up, something's not feeling right. Children's Services is still checking on kids. If you make hotline calls and say, hey, I don't know what's going on. I hear a lot of yelling coming out of there. I don't see the children outside at all. I don't know that it's going to hurt to just have them checked, just to make sure it's okay. This is just a really weird time to navigate in these waters. So there's really no good answer other than if you just think maybe there's something going on and something wrong, better be safe than sorry. I don't want a lot of, people just ratting on people.
Right, overreacting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's just, use your common sense, and if you'll know, I think you'll know if something, it needs to be reported.
Right. If you have an unsettling.
Yes.
And yeah. That's good to know, because one of my concerns was with the kids not being in school. I asked the Savannah School Board. I know that the cafeteria ladies and some of the school admin are still handing out meals throughout the week to kiddos. And I said, what kind of training do they have to notice if kids are being physically abused? And I was told that there is, at the beginning of every school year, there is training for the whole school. Custodians, kitchen helpers, volunteers. I mean, everybody goes to this to look for those telltale signs. So that made me feel good, because I thought, when you're handing that school lunch in to that window, You know,
Right, yeah.
you could maybe notice something, you know, and I guess I just want to say, you know, be aware. You know, it saddens my heart because you know it's still going on,
Yes.
but it's not getting reported, so the proper authorities don't know how to respond. And I'm not for snitching and tattletaling, but when it comes to our children and their safety and for
Yes.
the innocents and for the people that are weaker, you know, Jesus wants us to be that for them, you know, that voice. So I feel passionate about it, but obviously you do too, because this is your life's work.
Well, yes, and I mean, this week is, and I'm going to put a
Go
plug
ahead.
in for it, it's Crime Victims' Rights Week, and if you go to Northwest Missouri Crime Victim Resource page, I think that's what it is if you Google it. I even made the page and I can't remember what I called it. So Google something on Facebook, you'll find it. You'll see a list of events, and tomorrow just happens to be the day we would have planted pinwheels into the courthouse lawn, and it would represent Voices of Courage, which is our children's advocacy center, would be there, and each pinwheel represents a child they've served in Northwest Missouri as a whole. So
How many pinwheels would that have been?
I believe last year, there's probably around 600.
So that's just for a year.
Yes.
Wow.
And I could be wrong about that, don't quote me. If you go to their website, they'll tell you exactly, but I'm thinking that number sticks out to me.
Wow.
So, like, I'm posting tutorials about how to make a pinwheel. That might be a fun,
Oh, that's a great idea.
a fun thing to do with your child, so that they can kind of get, it's a craft, but you're bringing awareness. And then if you don't want to do that, there's a coloring page. That's cool. But so there's just different events we're going to have all through the week. So then you can go there and get resources, get phone numbers for places, just learn more about these agencies that are helping with crime victims in particular. And then there's also ways you can help too. You know, I know the YWCA looks for volunteers, so does Voices of Courage, to help with different functions throughout the year. So,
And there's also CASA workers, right? Now, do CASA
Yes.
workers help with child abuse situations?
they'll work more on the juvenile side. There, it's court-appointed special advocates, what it means. So they're going to work with kids and families. So they're basically the voice of the child, and that's run on a volunteer basis. And
So they need helpers too?
they always need them. And if you Google CASA Buchanan County, you'll find the information on how to do that. And I know some people in church are CASA volunteers, and they love it. So
I'm sure it's a tough job though.
yes, you see and hear a lot, and you know there's a whole lot more going on. Every day I'm at work, I read these reports, and I was like, oh, they need Jesus. They need Jesus. You know, we need to get out to these families more and work on conflict resolution. You know, how did Jesus resolve conflict? You know, how did he bring resolution into a storm?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he calmed it, right? So how do we help calm a storm inside of a house so nobody else is getting hurt?
Right.
Kids, you know, moms, dads,
Grandmas,
grandmas,
grandpas.
grandpas, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously this whole thing needs prayer, from advocacy to just the situation right now that maybe many of us aren't aware of, because in our homes, I know like in my home, the big joke is, I mean, we make the kids play games, you know, so they're tortured with that, but you know, a lot of kids don't know that kind of life, and so just prayer over the situation right now.
Yes.
Prayer for our volunteers, prayer for the police departments and the responding
Absolutely.
groups, organizations that are reaching out.
Yes, because it doesn't stop for us, you know, and I read all those reports. It's like I'm reliving all these assaults over and over and over every day. I know police officers see it every day, you know, so they see the injuries, they see all of that. You know, the CASA workers, the same, they read the reports, what happened to this child in this home. I mean, there's a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And I know our pastors they go through the same thing, because you guys hear a lot. You know, you hear a lot of stories, and there's a lot on you. So, you know, we need to do a lot of self-care. You know, how do we get a break from it? But then I think we also need to look at how do we teach not just, of course, the family unit, but even individuals, how to resolve conflict in their own lives. Like, how do I say I'm not comfortable, or I'm angry,
Right,
without being violent?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That doesn't have to be equate, but there's a big onion that needs to be peeled there. But
Okay. But is it a trickle down effect? I mean, do some of these abusers, were they once the abusee?
absolutely, yep. Statistics show that if you're abusers were most likely abused as a child. I mean, that's the example they see, that it's okay to hit. That's how I resolve conflict. I hit. There's that type of abuser, and then there's the one I call the domestic terrorist, basically, which is basically 2% of the abusers out there, and that is the one you see the movies made out of, where he literally terrorizes his victim or her victim, and it's mostly men who do this. I'm sorry to say, but they just terrorize them into doing. It's like, think about what ISIS or what the Taliban or any of them do to terrorize their people. They do heinous things to them to control behavior. So this is where you'll see a lot of homicides come out of. If you look at statistics for police officers shot in the line of duty, the person who shot them, the majority of them have been convicted or had cases against them for domestic violence.
Oh, wow.
Because if they're willing to hit their partner, someone they say they love, they have no problem shooting someone else. So that's where you see a lot of these homicides, especially where a police officer shot. There's probably a history of domestic violence in there one way or the other. So it's something we really need to address, and I think that even as a church we need to address it. It happens. There isn't a walk of life it doesn't touch.
Right. Just because we're Christians, we're not immune to
Absolutely.
domestic violence. There are still people being abused.
And I think one of the worst types of violence that gets used, especially when you talk about the church, is spiritual. So a lot of times abusers will use spirituality or use the Bible to justify their abuse and control and behavior. And then what you're doing is damaging someone's faith, because they believe that they're lesser than. It doesn't matter on which end. Jesus didn't make us to be lesser than anyone. The foot of the cross is level.
Yes.
And so when you're made to think that you're lesser, and they use the Bible, that I take that very seriously. That just breaks my heart, because then you're damaging someone's faith. Right. And that right there is something we need to address.
Bruises can heal.
Yes.
But sometimes that psychological, spiritual scarring.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure it can heal. With Jesus, all things are possible.
Yes.
But I understand what you're saying. It's a different kind of healing that would have to take place.
Anytime your faith is rocked because someone that says they care about you tries to alter what you know to be the truth, God's word, to make you do something they want you to do, or to justify what they're doing to you. I mean, that right there.
No, I
can't. That's to me almost worse than the bruises, like you said. Those will heal, but that mental aspect of it and the spiritual aspect of it that takes a lifetime. It'll scar you and change you. So we have to be there to help. Don't break a bruised reed, right? That's what God says. They're like, I will not break the bruised reed, and so we have to be gentle. He always nurses it back to health. Or he doesn't ever take out that wick. It's smoldering. There's still something there, but he fans it back to life, and so we have to be that.
Speak life,
speak
encouragement,
life.
but also be aware.
Be aware.
And maybe the abused doesn't really see their abuse as being abuse.
No, and also, I think it's important that we be educated on the dynamics of abuse, whether it be sexual, physical, child, to know the dynamics, because a lot of times you can do more harm than good if you're not giving them the correct information. And so a lot of times I will tell parents especially, you can't manage this. You're not a case manager, you're a parent. Get someone else involved that isn't directly involved with that victim.
Emotionally connected?
Yes. So you can detach from it, and then they'll work with you on how to be supportive, but not trying to manipulate the whole situation. Because that's what we do. That's mom deal right there.
Right.
Like, you hurt my child.
Yeah. I'm gonna fix it.
And this is what I would do, but why aren't you doing
Right.
what I just told you to do?
Right.
And it's like, this is a process that mom can't go through for their child.
Right.
Or so.
Or fix for their child.
Yes, you can't fix it. And so, that's something a case manager or somebody who's got more training in that is going to be able to guide you through, and just be there to be that sounding board. I tell moms all the time, and dads, if you have a question about this, especially with sexual assault victims, if you have a question about this, call me. Don't ask the victim. Because a lot of times that question you have is not for the victim's benefit, but it's for you. Because you want to know something, and they don't have the answers either. So it's hard, and so I say, call me, let's talk. We'll just talk it out.
Sure.
And so let's try to leave that victim alone about the case or about what happened, because they may not know exactly what happened, and that's okay. They can't give you all the answers you want. So
Right.
there's just a lot of training. I always say, if you don't know, just look at someone and say, I don't know the answer to that, but let me call around and find an answer or get you in touch with someone who does.
Right.
And then, but just know that I'm there for you. I'm going to pray with you. We're going to walk through this together. Because that's what Jesus says. Like, I can't make it go away, but I'm going to be with you through it.
Right. I'll walk with you through it.
Yeah, and that's what our role is, too.
That's neat. So you get a chance to be Jesus to people every day.
I really try to just think of, I'm just going to go with you through it, hands and feet. Let's be his hands and feet,
Right.
So that they have somebody tangible that they can call and talk to. But yeah, you got to cover that with a lot of prayer, because it can wear you down by the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah, it's got to be exhausting on some days, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Not every day.
You learn how to, I hate to say compartmentalize it, but that would be the correct word. I think it's because it's not happening directly to my family or somebody important to me, then I can deal with it on a professional level that isn't this personal. But I would have to say, if it was personal to me, I'd probably bring another one of my colleagues in and say, you're going to handle this one. I couldn't, because I have a whole different perspective. That's why I say I'm not a case manager for my family.
Right.
I'm going to bring somebody else in and have them work with them. And that also takes the pressure off that victim too. So
Good. Any other tips or anything? I'm going to go get the Frosties out. So any tips or any websites or anything, and I'll go get the stuff.
So I would tell you to call me if you have any questions at 816-901-1734. And like I said, I will get my messages. If I don't go into the office, I check on them. The church knows how to get a hold of me, and I will help you figure this out. The YWCA is a great resource also. They're, like I said, 24/7. Look how nice that is.
Yeah, it's not really firm like a Frosty, but it looks like a Frosty.
But whatever you do, don't hesitate to reach out for help. Because there's people here I know in this church who are ready to help. A lot of agencies throughout the community, and check out that Facebook page and see what events are coming up, and participate where you can.
Thank you, Siobahn. I appreciate it. I will say this has probably sat in the freezer for about 30 minutes, so my recommendation would be make them earlier in the day and have them as a nighttime treat,
Yes.
Dessert or something.
Yes. When you have your French fries ready.
Yes, exactly.
Let's see.
So let's taste it.
It does taste like a Wendy's Frosty, and when it's actually frozen, It'll be perfect.
It'll be
You'll
spot
love it.
on, as I say, because you
Yeah.
can tell there, at least in mine, there's some consistency that is
Yeah.
frosty-ish,
Yes.
but there's liquid around it, but it is
Yeah.
spot on.
It's good. You'll love it.
Wow, yes,
Yeah.
this is delicious. We might have to, I don't know, take a jug home.
There's a lot.
There is, it makes a lot, so be
Yeah.
aware of that as well. You know,
Yeah.
just line up some cups outside, fill them up, and then call your neighbors, have them come get them. I don't know.
From 6 feet.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate y'all. I know that this was a tough subject. I know that this is hard to hear about. It's hard to deal with. But I do think we really need to be aware of it just as much as we are when we're out and about in the world right now when we're enclosed in our homes. And just, you know, if you see something odd, say something. You know, if
Yes.
something doesn't set right with you, I'd better be safe than sorry personally. So.
Right. Right.
Anyway, thank you
Good
again,
job.
and take care, and we'll see you next week, and enjoy.
Yes.